Okay, this is a quick introduction in United States Census data. We're gonna start with a brief history lesson because I think it's important to be mindful of how changes have happened over the years. Um, United States Census is actually a constitutional mandate, Article 1, Section 2. The Congress is required to count people every 10 years. And the purpose, obviously, is to determine representation in the House of Representatives. So each state has different number of representatives assigned based on the population size. So this began back in 1790, and we conduct what is called decennial census every 10 years. Um, it is highly confidential, except after 72 years upon the census, you can actually look up the public records that has identifiable information. So the idea is that you can look at the past generations record so that you can ensure privacy at the time the census is conducted. But after some time, you can treat it as a historical record. And a lot of people in genealogy has been using this public census data a lot based on the 72-year rule. So back in 1790, obviously the census was much easier to conduct because there were only about 4 million people and about 13 states. Now, it is important though to think about what that was back in the day. The counting people wasn't necessarily everybody. So back in 1790, there were only 5 categories of individuals. Um, Free white males between the ages of 16 and older, and then white males under age of 16, or 2 categories. And then third category was free white female, and then fourth category was all other free persons. Now, fifth category, the slaves, based on what is called the Three-Fifths Compromise, which was established during the Constitutional Convention in 1787. The agreement was reached to count the slaves only as a three-fifths of a person. Now, that is until the 14th Amendment, which is 1868. So, for about 100 years, um, the census counted slaves only as three-fifths of a person until the 14th Amendment was ratified and the provision to count three-fifths of a person was removed, um, at which point we have a full persons counted, and that includes citizens and naturalized citizens in the United States. And as you can see, the cost of conducting a census also grew quite a bit. Back in 2020, which was the most recent census, it cost um, just under $13 billion. And that was also a very difficult census because of COVID. But the Census Bureau has done a pretty good job estimating our population. Now, while it's great to have that data about who we are every 10 years, there was an increasing demand for the census data. So starting about 1990s, there was a consideration for producing population estimates more frequently than every 10 years. So this American Community Survey was conceived, and what this does is instead of going around to count everybody like the decennial census does, it does a sampling of households every month. So in 1 year period, you can actually have what is called an annual sample. Or if you want to be more precise, you could actually consolidate a sample across 5 years to have more robust sample. And anyone interested in what how it was captured and how American Community Survey is conducted, the Census Bureau has extensive documentation on what that looks like. Now, with that in mind, what American Community Survey allows us to do is to look at this census data more frequently based on geography. So the ones that we know quite well are geographical units of states or counties, but the census tract and what they called metropolitan statistical area, those are very census data specific geographical units. So you think along the lines of geography and maps. By and large, these units are nested within within one another. So a great example here is a county that nests townships. So townships are very often nested within a county. And then what the Census Bureau calls place is very often cities, towns. So it's referring to local government entity. And what we're going to focus on today is this census tract. The census tract is more like a neighborhood. And then the census data actually has the ability to um, go even smaller than the census tract to down to block group or even down to block level. So what is exactly census tract? Well, census tract is usually about 4,000 people. So you can think of it as a neighborhood, although in urban areas, it could be a little higher. In rural areas, it could be a little bit lower. So here, one thing to remember though is obviously population changes over time. So a given census tract in 1 year could split the following census if there's a population gain. So going back to this example, if the census tract 3012 has gained dramatic number of population, let's say went over 10,000, then the Census Bureau could split the census tract so that it becomes 3012.1 and 3012.2. They can split it into two different census tracts. Or conversely, if there was a population loss to a point where there are enough people in a given census tract and they're next to another census tract that had a great deal of loss. So they could combine these two census tracts. Although it's rare, they could combine these two. So let's say 3012 and 3013, the following census that could combine these to call it 3015 as an example. So over time, these geographical units called census tract can change, whereas township is a very consistent measure. It does not change over time. Okay, so let's do a little bit of an example of how we can use census tract level data to make it useful. So looking at the total population change from 2018 to 2022 in the state of Illinois. Back in 2018, there were about 12.7 million people in the state. By 2022, that became roughly about 12.6. That's a decrease of about 1.2%. And just to give you a little bit of reference point, nationwide, during the same period, we went from 327 million to about 333 million. There was actually an increase of about uh, close to 2%. So while the nation has increased population, state of Illinois actually lost population ever so slightly. In terms of census tract, we have statewide about 3,265 as of year 2022. And this is what it looks like. So in this particular map, it's looking at the change in population from 2018 to 2022. And all those census tracts that are yellow means their population change was minimal, so, plus minus 3%. And the shades of orange and red shows the degree of population loss. So the light orange is about 3 to 5%, darker orange is 5 to 10%. And the red ones are the ones that had significant loss in population, growing greater than 10%. And then the green to blue. So light green is slight gain, about 3 to 5%, and darker green represents 5 to 10% in population gain. And dark blue areas are the ones that had significant population gain, more than 10%. So you can see what's interesting here is that those counties that include census tracts that had population losses, um, very often they tend to be the counties that border other states, like Indiana, the eastern part of the state, um, the southwestern part where they border Missouri and Iowa in to the west. And then if you look at, you zoom in a little bit to look at um, Cook County, for instance. Obviously, the census tracts are much smaller because it's more dense. And if you zoom in even further into Chicago, what's really interesting about the city during this time is that there's a lot of population gain despite overall loss of population in the city. The central areas, the Loop, River North, South Loop, certainly West Loop, have gained population. So the central part of the city has gained population. Whereas if you look at outlying areas, um, South Lawndale, which is often referred to as a little village, largely Latino population there. And then Gage Park, West Englewood and Englewood on the south side, Morgan Park on the far south side, South Chicago, the southeast side. Those areas have areas that have lost population, along with Jefferson Park up on the northwest side by O'Hare Airport. So even within the city, there was a great deal of differences by neighborhood as to how much the population has changed between 2018 and 2022. A couple more examples. The third largest city is in Winnebago County, Rockford. And you can kind of see, and this is, again, a lot of small census tracts here. Because this is Rockford, whereas this huge area is entirely one census tract. So that indicates that this is a rural area of the county. And the outlying areas of Rockford has gained population quite a bit, which is a good sign. Rockford for a very long time has been um, deteriorating and it seems to be gaining population as of late. So that's a good sign. Whereas if you go all the way the polar opposite side of the state in St. Clair County, where East St. Louis is, and so up here on the other side of the river is St. Louis, and this is East St. Louis, and there seems to be a great deal of population loss there. Um, and one more example here in Macon County in the middle of the state, where Decatur is. Um, it seems that the city of Decatur also had lost population in the central area of the city. So that's essentially how we can kind of use the census data to look at population change. The census data has a lot more than just total population. We can also disaggregate it by race, by age, um, other economic conditions. There are a lot of other information for individuals, households, you even has housing value and those kinds of things that we can look at. So this is just the sort of first step into understanding how to look at the census data using the geography of the census.